The council chamber was enormous. It stretched high above the gathered representatives, its ceiling lost in artificial stars that mimicked the galaxy itself. Ji-hoon stood at the human podium, his hands gripping the smooth metal edge. He watched the holographic display at the center of the room and his stomach turned. The display showed 3 planets. They were beautiful worlds covered in silver forests and purple oceans. But around them, something terrible was happening. A darkness spread through space like ink in water. It had no shape, no form. It simply consumed everything it touched. Stars winked out, planets vanished. The phenomenon had a name that scientists had given it: the void drift. Velthar stood at the Velkari podium across the chamber. He was tall and thin, with 4 arms and a body covered in an exoskeleton that shimmered like oil on water. His species looked like insects to human eyes, but they were brilliant, kind people. Right now, Velthar's voice shook as he spoke. "These are our last worlds," he said. The translation device made his clicking speech into words everyone could understand. "We have already lost our home system. 15 billion souls gone. We managed to evacuate 4 million to these colonies. But the void drift follows us. Our scientists cannot stop it. Cannot slow it. In 3 weeks, maybe 4, it will reach these worlds. We are asking for help. We are begging." Mirai sat in the observation section behind Ji-hoon. She was a military officer, sent to advise him on strategic matters. She had read the reports. The Velkari had nothing left. No army, no resources, no leverage. They were refugees asking for a miracle. The council members began to speak. One by one, they explained why they could not help. The Hexathi representative spoke first. She was a tall being made of crystal that rang like bells when she moved. The cost of intervention would be 3 trillion credits. The Hexathi Commonwealth cannot justify this expense for a species that offers no strategic value. The Morthene delegate agreed. He was bulky and covered in thick fur. "Our evacuation ships are committed to commercial routes. Rerouting them would cost our economy billions. We sympathize, but we must think of our own people first." On and on it went. 23 species sat on the Galactic Council. 22 of them found reasons to say no. Some were apologetic. Others were blunt. A few seemed annoyed that the Velkari had even asked. Ji-hoon listened to them all. He felt Mirai's eyes on his back. She had told him what Earth's military analysts had concluded. Helping the Velkari would cost humanity dearly. Earth had only joined the Council 30 years ago. They were still building their fleet, still establishing trade routes, still trying to earn respect among species that had traveled the stars for thousands of years. If humanity committed its ships to this rescue, it would leave Earth vulnerable. It would drain the economy. It would use up resources that were meant for colony expansion and defense upgrades. The smart move, the strategic move, was to vote number. Velthar's voice brought Ji-hoon back to the moment. "Is there no one?" the Velkari asked. His translator could not hide the despair in his voice. "Will you all simply watch us die?" The chamber fell silent. Representatives looked at their displays or whispered to their aides. No one met Velthar's eyes. The council leader, an ancient being called a Threm, spoke in a deep, rumbling voice. "We have heard from all members except Earth. Ambassador Ji-hoon, what is humanity's position?" Ji-hoon felt every eye in the chamber turn to him. He thought about the orders he had received from Earth, the careful political language, the phrases about regrettable situations and limited resources. He thought about the analysts and economists who had spent weeks calculating the cost. Then he thought about something else. He thought about a story his grandmother had told him when he was small. She had survived a great flood when she was young. The waters had come fast and she was trapped on a roof with dozens of others. A fisherman had come in his boat, making trip after trip, saving everyone he could. The fisherman had lost his boat to the flood, lost his nets, lost everything. But he never stopped coming back. "We will help," Ji-hoon said. The chamber erupted. Representatives turned to each other in surprise. Some laughed. Others looked confused. The Hexathi representative spoke, her crystal body ringing sharp notes. "Ambassador, surely Earth cannot afford this. You are a young species. Your economy is fragile. This will cost you everything." "Yes," Ji-hoon said simply. "It will cost us greatly." "Then why?" asked the Morthene delegate. "What do you gain?" Ji-hoon looked at Velthar. The Velkari stood very still, his forearms trembling. "We gain nothing," Ji-hoon said. "But that is not why we do it. We are young to these stars, yes. We have little to offer, true, but we remember what it means to face extinction. We remember what it feels like when hope dies. We will not stand by and watch. The council leader leaned forward. You understand what you are committing to? Earth will need to send every deep space vessel you possess. Your fleet will be gone for months. Your defenses will be minimal. Your economy will suffer. We understand, Jihoon said. His voice was steady now. And our answer remains yes. Mireille stood up in the observation section. She walked down to the floor and stood beside Jihoon. The military supports this decision, she said. We will need 3 days to organize the fleet. Then we will depart for Valkyrie space. The chamber filled with noise again. Some species were shocked. Others seemed amused, as if watching children make a foolish mistake. The Hexathi representative actually laughed, a sound like breaking glass. This emotional decision-making will be your downfall, humans. You cannot rule the stars with sentiment. Velthar moved across the chamber floor. He stopped in front of Jihoon and Mirai. He did something the humans had never seen a Valkyrie do before. He lowered himself down, touching his head to the ground. We have no words for this gift, he said. We are a people about to die, and you offer us life. We will remember. Always we will remember. Jihoon helped him stand. Save your thanks, he said gently. Let us see if we can actually pull this off first. The council session ended. As the representatives filed out, many of them whispered to each other. The humans had made a critical error, they said. Earth would be weak now, vulnerable. Some species were already calculating how they might take advantage of this foolish compassion. Back on Earth, the news spread quickly. The government announced the deployment of the entire deep space fleet to Valkyrie space. There were protests. People asked why they should sacrifice for aliens no one had ever heard of. But there were also vigils. Churches and temples held services. Schools taught children about the Valkyrie and their dying worlds. Admiral Doyen received his orders at the military command center. He was to take every ship that could reach Valkyrie space in time. Every transport, every cargo hauler, every vessel that could hold passengers. He looked at the logistics and shook his head. It was barely possible, and that was if everything went perfectly. His chief engineer, Hyejin, came to his office. She had been working for 30 hours straight, planning routes and calculating fuel. Sir, she said, we can do this. But we will not have enough fuel to bring the fleet home quickly. We will need to refuel at Valkyrie stations if they still stand. Then we better move fast, Doyen said. He activated the fleet-wide communication channel. All ships, this is Admiral Doyen. We have been given an impossible mission. We are going to save 4 million people who cannot save themselves. Yes, it will cost us. Yes, it is dangerous. But this is who we are. This is who we choose to be. Prepare for immediate departure. 3 days later, the human fleet left Earth's orbit. 247 ships, everything humanity could spare. They formed up and engaged their faster-than-light drives, disappearing into the space between stars. Behind them, Earth's orbital defenses looked suddenly small and lonely. The planet that had always seemed so strong now sat vulnerable in space, its guardians gone on a mission of mercy. And far away, at the edge of Valkyrie space, the void drift continued to spread. Time was running out. The human fleet arrived in Valkyrie space 18 days after leaving Earth. Admiral Doyen stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at the main display. What he saw made his blood run cold. The void drift was closer than the reports had indicated. Much closer. The first colony world, a planet the Valkyrie called Vector, would be consumed in less than 2 weeks. The other 2 worlds had maybe 3 weeks, possibly 4. Get me a full scan of all 3 planets, Doyen ordered. I need population counts, infrastructure locations, and evacuation site recommendations. Now. Hyejin worked at her station, her fingers flying across the controls. She had barely slept since they left Earth. None of them had. Sir, Vector has 1.8 million inhabitants. They have 4 major cities and dozens of smaller settlements. The other 2 worlds have similar numbers. Can we evacuate them in time? Hyejin hesitated. That hesitation told Doyen everything he needed to know. If everything goes perfectly, yes. If we encounter any delays, any technical problems, I get it, Doyen said. So we make sure nothing goes wrong. The evacuation began immediately. Human ships descended to the 3 Valkyrie worlds. The Valkyrie had prepared as best they could. They had organized their people into groups, assigned meeting points, created lists. But panic was setting in. 4 million people trying to flee dying worlds created chaos no matter how much you planned. Captain Bowman commanded one of the transport ships landing on Vector. She watched through her view screen as thousands of Velkari crowded toward the landing zones. They carried what they could. Most had only small bags. Children clung to their parents. The elderly were helped along by younger ones. "Open the cargo bays," Bowman ordered. "Get them inside as fast as possible." The Velkari came aboard in waves. They were frightened but orderly. They thanked the human crew members, their translator devices turning their clicks and whistles into words of gratitude. Bowman's crew worked around the clock processing refugees, assigning them spaces, distributing food and water. On the second world, things were harder. The planet's name was Shekra and it had rougher terrain. Landing zones were limited. Commander Jinho commanded the evacuation effort there, and he quickly realized they had a problem. The ships could not land close enough to some of the settlements. The Velkari would have to travel hundreds of kilometers to reach the ships. "We need ground vehicles," Jinho reported to Doyen. "We do not have enough to move everyone quickly." Doyen made a decision that would haunt him later. "Strip the colony supply ships. Take every vehicle we have, even the ones meant for our own new colonies. This is more important." Back on Earth, people watched the news feeds. The government had set up live broadcasts from the fleet. People saw the human crews working themselves to exhaustion. They saw the Velkari families boarding the ships. They saw the void drift growing larger in the sky above the dying worlds. The cost became real quickly. Energy rationing began on Earth within a week. The fleet required constant supply runs, and that meant fuel that would have powered cities was instead burning in space. Factories scaled back production. Lights dimmed across entire continents. The economy started to shake. Stock markets fell. Companies that depended on space trade found their shipping routes disrupted. Unemployment rose. People who had supported the mission began to question it. Was this worth it? Were these aliens worth this sacrifice? But the fleet continued working. Day after day, ship after ship, the humans evacuated the Velkari. Admiral Doyen barely left the bridge. He survived on coffee and brief naps in his chair. He watched the void drift and did calculations in his head. Time. It always came down to time. Velthar worked alongside the humans. He helped organize his people, settled disputes, kept everyone calm. He saw how hard the humans were working. He saw their exhaustion. One night he found Doyen alone on the observation deck. "You are killing yourselves for us," Velthar said quietly. Doyen stared out at the stars. In the distance, the void drift was visible as a patch of absolute darkness where stars should be. "We made a choice," he said, "but why? We are nothing to you. We have nothing to offer in return." Doyen was quiet for a long moment. "My grandfather told me a story once," he finally said. "During the resource wars on Earth, his village was dying. No food, no water. A relief convoy came through, distributing supplies. They were supposed to skip his village because it was too small, not worth the fuel to make the detour. But the convoy commander came anyway. My grandfather asked him why. The commander said because people were dying and he could help, so he did. It was that simple. And what happened to the commander? He was court-martialed for wasting resources, stripped of his rank." Doyen smiled sadly. "But my grandfather lived, had children. Those children had children. I exist because one man thought saving lives was more important than following rules." Velthar's translator could not capture the emotion in his response, but Doyen understood anyway. "We will remember this," the Velkari said. "However long our species survives, we will remember." On the 16th day, disaster struck. The transport ship Horizon's Hope was loading refugees from a coastal city on Vector when the void drift suddenly surged forward. The phenomenon did not move steadily. Sometimes it jumped, leaping across space like a predator pouncing. Captain Nari commanded the Horizon's Hope. She saw the readings and knew immediately what was happening. "Emergency liftoff," she screamed into the ship-wide comm. "Close all hatches. We need to go now." But thousands of Velkari were still boarding. Families halfway up the ramps. Children being carried by their parents. If she closed the hatches now, hundreds would be left behind. If she waited, everyone would die. She waited. The void drift hit the ship's shields just as the last Velkari stumbled aboard. The shields flared bright white, then collapsed. The ship's engines screamed as Nari pushed them beyond their limits. The horizon's hope clawed its way out of the planet's gravity well, the void drift's edge mere kilometers behind it. They almost made it. The ship's rear section touched the drift's boundary. There was no explosion, no fire. The metal simply ceased to exist. Power failed. Life support cut out in half the ship. 300 refugees and 20 crew members in the aft sections died instantly, pulled into non-existence. But the front section of the ship kept going, momentum carrying it free. 2,000 Velkari and 80 crew members survived. Doyen stared at the casualty report. The first deaths. He wanted to scream, to punch something, to break down. Instead, he took a deep breath and kept working. They still had millions to save. The evacuation continued. The fleet pushed harder, worked faster. They abandoned safety protocols, pushed engines past their limits, took risks that would have gotten them all court-martialed in peacetime. On the 21st day, they lost another ship. The cargo hauler Steadfast Shadow suffered a catastrophic engine failure while fully loaded. It could not achieve orbit. Captain Minsu made the decision to crash land in an empty area rather than let his ship fall on a city. He and his crew of 30, plus 800 Velkari refugees, died on impact, but 4 million more lived. On the 27th day, Admiral Doyen gave the final evacuation order. The last ship lifted off from the last colony world. Every Velkari who could be found and brought to safety was aboard the fleet. The 3 planets were empty now, their cities abandoned, their streets silent. 8 hours later, the void drift consumed Vector. The planet simply vanished, erased from existence as if it had never been. 2 days after that, the other 2 worlds followed. The human fleet regrouped in deep space. 247 ships had come to Velkari space. 245 were leaving. The mood aboard every vessel was strange. They had succeeded. 4 million Velkari had been saved, but the price had been paid in human lives and human ships. Doyen stood on his bridge and looked at his tired crew. "Take us home," he said quietly. The journey back took longer than the journey out. The fleet's fuel reserves were low. They had to stop at multiple refueling stations, and each stop cost money Earth did not really have. The Galactic Council watched humanity's economic collapse with interest. Some species began making moves on human trade routes, testing Earth's weakened defenses. When the fleet finally reached Earth orbit, the celebration was muted. People were proud of what had been accomplished, but they were also exhausted and worried. The economy was in recession. Unemployment had doubled. Energy rationing continued. The Velkari refugees were settled on several human worlds and stations. They were given homes, jobs, access to resources. Earth could not afford it, but they did it anyway. Velthar and the other Velkari elders made a formal declaration. They swore an eternal debt to humanity. They promised that someday, somehow, they would repay what had been given. Most humans appreciated the sentiment but did not take it seriously. What could the Velkari possibly offer? They were refugees with nothing but the clothes they wore. But the Velkari remembered. Every single one of them remembered the humans who died to save them. They remembered the sacrifice Earth had made. And they began quietly and without fanfare to work. 50 years passed. The galaxy moved on. New crises emerged. The story of humanity's foolish compassion became a minor footnote in galactic history. The Velkari integrated into human society. They became engineers, craftsmen, researchers. Ambassador Sunwoo walked through the corridors of Meridian Prime Station, heading toward the Galactic Council chambers. He was young for an ambassador, only 42. But he carried himself with the quiet confidence his grandfather had been famous for. Jihoon had died 10 years ago, but his legacy lived on. Today's emergency council session had been called because of the Drexians. Sunwoo felt his jaw tighten at the thought of them. The Drexians were a reptilian species, large and aggressive. For the past 20 years, they had been expanding their empire through military conquest. They would find a weaker species, make impossible demands, and then invade when those demands were rejected. So far, they had conquered 7 different civilizations. The Galactic Council had done nothing. Every time the Drexians attacked someone new, the Council would meet, discuss, and ultimately decide that intervention was too expensive or too risky. The pattern was always the same. Now the Drexians had turned their attention to humanity. Sunwoo entered the council chamber and took his place at the human podium. The room looked exactly as it had 50 years ago when his grandfather stood here and committed Earth's fleet to save the Valkyrie. The same artificial stars on the ceiling, the same arrangement of seats. But so much had changed. Admiral Borum sat in the observation section. She was the current commander of Earth's defense forces, a sharp-minded strategist who had spent her entire career rebuilding the fleet after the Valkyrie evacuation. She caught Sunwoo's eye and gave him a slight nod. They both knew what was coming. Krithax entered the chamber. He was the supreme commander of the Drexian Empire, and he was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in dark green scales with eyes that seemed to evaluate everything as either prey or obstacle. He moved to the Drexian podium with absolute confidence. The council leader, a Threm named Boltar, called the session to order. "We are gathered to address the situation between the Drexian Empire and the human territories," Boltar said in his deep, rumbling voice. "Commander Krithax, please state your position." Krithax spoke without preamble. The Drexian Empire requires 3 human colony systems: New Sol, Bright Harbor, and Sanctuary. These systems lie along strategic trade routes that we need. Additionally, humanity will pay annual tribute of 500 billion credits. "These are our terms." The chamber erupted in whispers. Sunwoo felt his hands grip the podium edge. 500 billion credits would bankrupt Earth within a year. And the 3 colonies he had named were home to nearly 30 million humans. "And if we refuse?" Sunwoo asked, though he already knew the answer. Krithax smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Then we will take them by force. Our fleet is already positioned at your border. You have 72 hours to respond." Sunwoo looked around the chamber at the other species representatives. Surely someone would object to this naked aggression. Surely the council would not allow one member to threaten another so openly. But the representatives avoided his gaze. They looked at their displays or whispered to their aides. The pattern was repeating itself. Boltar spoke carefully. "Ambassador Sunwoo, perhaps you should consider the Drexian terms. They are substantial, but war would be costly for everyone. You are telling me to surrender." Sunwoo could not keep the disbelief from his voice. "To just hand over 3 colony worlds and bankrupt our economy?" The Hexathi representative spoke up. She was younger than the one who had been here 50 years ago, but her tone was the same. "Ambassador, you must be realistic. The Drexian fleet numbers over 1,200 warships. Our intelligence suggests your fleet has only 300 combat-capable vessels. The mathematics are clear. So we should just give up? Without even trying?" "We are advising prudence," said the Morthean delegate. "Sometimes survival requires compromise." Sunwoo looked at them all. These were the same species that had refused to help the Valkyrie. The same species that had watched 7 other civilizations fall to the Drexians without lifting a finger. And now they were telling him to surrender without a fight. "No," he said simply. Krithax laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Foolish. You think you can stand against the Drexian Empire? Your fleet is adequate at best. Your military is unremarkable. You will lose, and you will lose quickly." "Maybe," Sunwoo acknowledged. "But we will not hand over our people without a fight. Earth's answer is no. We reject your demands." The chamber fell silent. Several representatives looked shocked. Others seemed almost amused, as if watching someone make a predictable mistake. Boltar leaned forward. "Ambassador, please reconsider. The Drexian military is the most powerful in known space. Your grandfather's compassion toward the Valkyrie weakened Earth significantly. You never fully recovered. This is not a fight you can win." Before Sunwoo could respond, a voice spoke from the observation section. "Excuse me," everyone turned. A Valkyrie stood up. It was Tikvan, one of the younger generation born after the evacuation. He walked down to the council floor with the formal permission of the guards. "I apologize for the interruption," Tikvan said, "but I must speak." "This is highly irregular," Boltar said. "The Valkyrie are not a council member species." "No," Tikvan agreed. "We are refugees living under human protection, which is precisely why I must speak." He turned to face Krithax. 50 years ago, my people were dying. We stood before this council and begged for help. Every species here said no. They calculated the cost and decided we were not worth saving. The Valkyrie situation is not relevant to... The Hexathi representative began. "It is entirely relevant," Tikvan interrupted, "because humanity said yes. They did not calculate profit. They did not weigh strategic value. They saw people who needed help and they helped. It cost them dearly. They lost ships. They lost lives. Their economy collapsed. And they never once asked us for repayment. Krithax snorted. A touching story. But sentiment does not win wars. No, Tikvan agreed. But loyalty does. And the Velkari remember what humanity did for us. He walked over to Sunwoo and placed one of his 4 hands on the ambassador's shoulder. We have not forgotten. We will never forget. Admiral Boram stood up in the observation section. If I may add something, she said. Earth's fleet may number only 300 ships. But those 300 ships are crewed by people who believe in something. The Drexians fight for conquest. We fight for our homes, our families, and our friends. That makes a difference. Krithax turned to face her. You think belief will stop my warships? You think loyalty will shield you from our weapons? You are delusional. We will see, Boram said calmly. The council session continued for another hour, but nothing changed. No species offered to help humanity. Some expressed sympathy, but cited various reasons why they could not intervene. Others were more blunt, suggesting that humanity had brought this on themselves with their emotional decision-making regarding the Velkari. When the session ended, Sunwoo left the chamber feeling hollow. He had known the council would not help, but having it confirmed so absolutely was different than expecting it. Tikvan caught up with him in the corridor. Behind him were several other Velkari, including Velthar himself. The elder Velkari was ancient now, his exoskeleton dulled with age, but his eyes were still sharp. Ambassador, Velthar said, we need to talk privately. They met in Sunwoo's private quarters aboard the station. Only Velthar, Tikvan, Admiral Boram, and Sunwoo were present. 50 years, Velthar began. 50 years we have waited for this moment. Not hoped for it, of course. We prayed it would never come. But we prepared for it anyway. What are you talking about? Boram asked. Tikvan activated a holographic display. It showed technical schematics, designs for ships and weapons that Boram had never seen before. Since the day humanity saved us, we have been working, building. We Velkari are gifted engineers. You gave us resources, protection, and time. We use those gifts to create something new. Weapons? Sunwoo asked. Not weapons, Velthar corrected. Tools. The Velkari way is not destruction. But we can disable, disrupt, and defend. For 50 years, every Velkari engineer has contributed to this project. We have built a fleet. A secret fleet. 300 ships designed not to kill but to stop. Boram stared at the schematics. This technology, I have never seen anything like it. Because we invented it, Tikvan said with quiet pride. Shield disruptors that can penetrate any known defensive system. Engine dampeners that can freeze a ship in space. Communication blackout devices that can isolate an entire fleet. We do not destroy our enemies. We make them helpless. Why didn't you tell us about this? Sunwoo demanded. Because we were not ready, Velthar said. And because we wanted to be sure. We swore a debt to humanity. When the time came to repay that debt, we wanted to repay it in full. He stepped closer to Sunwoo. Your grandfather saved 4 million Velkari when he had no reason to. Today, 4 million Velkari stand ready to save humanity. This is our way. This is how we remember. Outside, in the cold darkness of space beyond Meridian Prime, the Drexian fleet waited at the human border. 1,200 warships, the largest invasion force ever assembled. Their crews were confident, their commanders certain of victory. Back on Earth, families gathered around news screens. They knew the Drexian ultimatum. They knew the fleet was outnumbered 4-1. Some people packed bags ready to flee if the invasion came. The Drexian fleet crossed into human space exactly 72 hours after the ultimatum expired. 1,200 warships moved in perfect formation, their hulls dark green like the scales of their creators. They were headed for New Sol, the closest of the 3 colony systems Krithax had demanded. Admiral Boram watched them come on her tactical display. Her flagship, the Rising Dawn, held position at the edge of the New Sol system alongside the rest of humanity's defense fleet. 300 human ships against 1,200 Drexian vessels. The mathematics were brutal. They are not even trying to hide their numbers, said Commander Yunji, who led the fighter wing. They want us to see how badly we are outnumbered. Let them have their confidence, Boram said quietly. It will make the surprise more effective. On the Drexian flagship, Krithax studied his own tactical display. The human fleet was arranged in a standard defensive formation around New Sol. Nothing clever, nothing unexpected. They would make a stand here and lose quickly. He had given them a chance to surrender. Now they would learn what defiance cost. All ships advance, Krithax ordered. Target their capital ships first. I want this over in less than an hour. The Drexian fleet accelerated. Their weapons charged, shields activated to maximum strength. The humans would fire first, Krithax knew. They would throw everything they had at his fleet and it would not be enough. Then his ships would return fire and the human fleet would be destroyed. It was always the same. Species that refused Drexian demands always fought. They always lost. This would be no different. Aboard the Rising Dawn, Borum waited. She could see the Drexian ships getting closer. Any moment now, Krithax would expect her to open fire. Instead, she activated a special communication channel. Tikvan, are you in position? We are ready, Admiral, came the reply. Tikvan's voice was calm. All Velkari ships are holding at the coordinates you provided. We are invisible to their sensors. Stand by, Borum said. She switched to the fleet-wide human channel. All ships, this is Admiral Borum. Do not fire. I repeat, do not fire. Hold your positions and trust me. She could feel the confusion from her own crews. Every instinct screamed at them to shoot first, to try to thin the enemy numbers before they got close. But they followed orders. The human fleet held steady, weapons charged but not firing. Krithax saw this and laughed. They are frozen with fear, he told his officers. They see our numbers and cannot even bring themselves to fight back. This will be easier than I thought. The Drexian fleet reached optimal weapons range. Krithax raised his hand, ready to give the order to fire. The human fleet would be crippled in the first volley. Now, Borum said quietly. Space twisted. 300 Velkari ships phased into existence around the Drexian fleet. They had been there all along, hidden by stealth technology that no one in the galaxy knew existed. One moment space was empty. The next it was full of silver ships that seemed to shimmer like oil on water. What is this? Krithax roared. Where did they come from? His tactical officer was frantically scanning. Sir, I am reading 300 unknown vessels. They appeared from nowhere. Sensors did not detect them until they revealed themselves. Identify them. They are Velkari ships, sir, but we have no record of the Velkari possessing any military vessels. Then destroy them, Krithax snarled. All ships target the new arrivals. Fire at will. The Drexian fleet opened fire. Thousands of weapons discharged at once. Enough firepower to vaporize a small moon. Energy beams and missiles streaked toward the Velkari ships and every single shot missed. The Velkari vessels moved like nothing Krithax had ever seen. They were not fast exactly, but they seemed to know where each shot would go before it was fired. They slipped between the attacks like water flowing around stones. How are they doing that? Krithax demanded. Then the Velkari ships fired back. But they did not use conventional weapons. Blue pulses of energy lanced out from each vessel, striking the Drexian ships with pinpoint accuracy. Nothing exploded. There were no fireballs, no hull breaches, no dramatic destruction. Instead, the Drexian ships simply stopped working. The first wave of blue pulses hit 200 Drexian vessels. Their shields flickered once and then collapsed completely. Their engines cut out. Their weapons powered down. Life support systems remained active, but everything else simply died. The mighty warships became nothing more than metal boxes drifting in space. Report, Krithax screamed. What is happening? Sir, ships are reporting complete systems failure. Engines offline, weapons offline, shields down. But we are detecting no damage. The systems are just stopped. A second wave of blue pulses swept out from the Velkari fleet. Another 200 Drexian ships went dark. Their crews were alive and unharmed, but the vessels were as dead as derelicts. Krithax felt something he had not experienced in decades. Fear. All ships retreat. Fall back immediately. But it was too late. The Velkari ships moved through the Drexian formation like surgeons working with precision instruments. Blue pulse after blue pulse, each one disabling another enemy vessel. The Drexians tried to run, but their faster-than-light drives would not engage. The dampening field from the Velkari ships prevented it. In less than 10 minutes, 800 Drexian warships were disabled. The remaining 400 tried desperately to flee, but the Velkari ships pursued them, not aggressively, not with violence, but with the calm efficiency of people doing a job they had prepared for. On the Rising Dawn, Borum watched the tactical display in something close to awe. The Drexian fleet, the largest invasion force in known history, was being neutralized without a single casualty. The Velkari ships were not killing anyone. They were simply making it impossible for the Drexians to fight. "This is incredible," Yunji breathed. "I have never seen anything like this." Borum activated the communication channel to Tikvan. "I have to ask, why not use lethal weapons? You could have destroyed their fleet just as easily." Tikvan's response was immediate. "Because that is not who we are, Admiral. 50 years ago, humanity saved us without destroying our enemies. You simply removed us from danger. We learned from you. We do not kill when we can disable. We do not destroy when we can stop. This is the Velkari way taught to us by humans." On the Drexian flagship, Krithax stared at his now useless controls. His ship was dead in space, surrounded by vessels he could not fight. His crew looked at him, waiting for orders he could not give. A communication signal came through on the emergency channels, which apparently still worked. A human voice, Admiral Borum's voice, spoke clearly. "Commander Krithax, this is Admiral Borum of the Human Defense Fleet. Your invasion force has been neutralized. Your crews are alive and unharmed. Your ships can be repaired, but your war is over." Krithax said nothing. What could he say? Borum continued. "You came here expecting an easy victory over a weak species. You thought humanity stood alone. You were wrong. We have friends. We have allies who remember what we did for them, and those allies just saved us the same way we once saved them." Another voice joined the channel. Tikvan spoke now, and his words were broadcast across every frequency so that every Drexian crew member could hear. "I am Tikvan of the Velkari people. 50 years ago, my species faced extinction. The Galactic Council refused to help us. Every species we asked said no. Every species except humanity. The humans came when we had nothing to offer in return. They spent their last resources to save us. They lost ships and lives to keep us alive. They never asked for repayment. They never expected anything back." He paused. "But we Velkari remember. We remember every ship that came to rescue us. We remember every human who died to save Velkari lives. We remember that when the galaxy abandoned us, humanity did not. Today we repay that debt. Today we show the galaxy what loyalty means." The message ended. In the silence that followed, Krithax felt something crack inside him. Not his body, but his certainty. The Drexians conquered through strength and fear. But somehow, two of the weakest species in the galaxy had just defeated his entire fleet without killing a single person. Back on Meridian Prime Station, the Galactic Council watched the battle through long-range sensors. The chamber was completely silent. 23 species representatives stared at the displays showing the disabled Drexian fleet and the Velkari ships moving among them. The Hexathi representative spoke first, her crystal body making confused, discordant sounds. "This is impossible. The Velkari are refugees. They have no military. Where did these ships come from?" "They built them," someone whispered. "In 50 years they built an entire fleet." The Morthene delegate stood up. "And they kept it secret? From everyone?" Ambassador Sunwoo had been watching from his podium. Now he spoke and his voice carried across the chamber. "They kept it secret because they are not conquerors. They did not build these ships to attack anyone. They built them to repay a debt. 50 years ago, my grandfather stood in this very chamber and committed humanity's fleet to save the Velkari. Today the Velkari returned the favor." He looked around at all the representatives who had refused to help humanity against the Drexians. "Let this be a lesson. Humanity does not make alliances based on strategic value or economic benefit. We help those who need help. We stand by our friends, and apparently, our friends do the same for us." 3 weeks after the battle, the Galactic Council convened for another emergency session. The chamber was more crowded than usual. Representatives from species who rarely attended council meetings had shown up. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Krithax stood at the Drexian podium. He looked different than he had before the invasion. His posture was less confident, his movements more careful. Defeat had taught him humility, though perhaps not enough. "The Drexian Empire demands an investigation," Krithax began. "The Velkari fleet used weapons technology that violates multiple galactic treaties. Their stealth capabilities alone constitute a banned military advancement. We demand sanctions against both the Velkari and humanity for this violation." Several council members nodded. The Hexathi representative rang out in support. "We must address this unauthorized military buildup. The Velkari developed advanced weapons in secret. This cannot be allowed." Ambassador Sunwoo remained silent. He glanced back at Tikvan, who sat in the observation section. The young Velkari met his eyes and gave a slight nod. They had prepared for this. Boltar, the council leader, turned his ancient eyes toward the Velkari section. Tikvan of the Velkari, you are accused of developing illegal weapons technology. How do you respond? Tikvan stood and walked to the council floor. He carried a datapad with him. I am happy to provide complete technical specifications of every system on our ships, he said calmly. In fact, I brought them with me. He activated his datapad and holographic displays appeared throughout the chamber. Detailed schematics, design documents, power specifications, everything. The council members and their technical advisors began scanning through the information. As you can see, Tikvan continued, every single system on our ships complies with galactic law. Our shield disruptors use electromagnetic pulses within regulated frequencies. Our engine dampeners employ gravitic fields that fall below the band threshold. Our stealth technology is simply advanced heat dispersion and sensor reflection, nothing exotic. A technical advisor to the Hexathi representative looked up from her display. He is correct. Everything here is legal. Advanced, yes. Sophisticated beyond anything we have seen, certainly, but legal. The technology itself may be legal, Krythax argued, but the secret military buildup is not. They hid an entire fleet from the galaxy. Tikvan smiled. We did not hide anything. We simply built ships quietly. There is no galactic law requiring a species to announce their ship construction. The Velkari are not a council member species. We are refugees living under human protection. We built ships using resources humanity provided. That is our right. The Morthene delegate spoke up. But why? Why build such a fleet in secret? Because we owed a debt, Tikvan said simply. He turned to face the entire council. 50 years ago, we came to this chamber as a dying species. We begged for help. Every species here except humanity said no. You calculated costs and benefits. You weighed strategic values. You decided we were not worth saving. He let that sink in for a moment. Humanity did not calculate. They did not weigh values. They simply helped because it was right. It cost them greatly. Their economy collapsed. They lost ships and lives. They weakened themselves to save us, and they never once asked for anything in return. Velthar stood up in the observation section. The ancient Velkari moved slowly now, but his presence commanded attention. May I speak? He asked Boltar. The council leader nodded. Velthar made his way to the floor, standing beside Tikvan. When he spoke, his voice was soft but carried throughout the chamber. I am old now. I was young when we came here begging for our lives. I remember every moment of that day. I remember the silence after we asked for help. I remember the calculations in your eyes as you decided we were not worth the cost. And I remember Ambassador Jihoon standing up and saying yes when everyone else said no. He looked around at the assembled representatives. You call humanity weak because they help without calculating profit. You call them foolish because they act on emotion. But we Velkari learned something you have not. Compassion is not weakness. It is an investment that grows over time. It is a debt that compounds across years. Velthar's voice grew stronger. Humanity saved 4 million souls when they had no reason to. No strategic advantage, no economic benefit, just because it was the right thing to do. Today, those 4 million souls saved humanity in return. This is how real alliances work. This is what loyalty means. The council chamber was silent. No one seemed to know what to say. Finally, a voice spoke from an unexpected source. The Farron representative stood up. The Farrons were a small, peaceful species that rarely involved themselves in galactic politics. I wish to make a statement, she said. The Farron Collective has voted to offer humanity a formal alliance treaty. Military support, trade agreements, technology sharing, everything. Sunwoo stared at her in surprise. Why? He asked. Because we have been watching, the Farron representative said. We saw what humanity did for the Velkari. We saw the Velkari's response. We have concluded that humanity makes allies who remember. In a galaxy where most alliances last only as long as they are convenient, that is valuable. Another voice spoke up. The representative from the Solith Commonwealth stood. The Solith also wished to offer an alliance. For the same reasons. Then another, and another. Species that had remained silent during the Drexian crisis were now stepping forward to align themselves with humanity. Not because humanity was strong. Not because humanity was rich or powerful. But because humanity had demonstrated something rare, genuine compassion that created genuine loyalty. Krithax watched this unfold with growing horror. He had come here expecting sanctions against humanity. Instead, humanity was gaining allies. His defeat was not just military, it was political. "This is absurd," he said. "You are forming alliances based on sentiment? On emotional stories about debts and loyalty?" "Yes," said the Farron representative simply. "Because those are the alliances that last." Boltar raised his hand for silence. "The matter of sanctions against the Velkari and humanity is dismissed. Their actions were legal and justified. However, this council must now address the larger issue. The Drexian Empire has invaded a council member species without provocation. This cannot stand." Krithax's scales paled slightly. "We were exercising our right to expand. The humans were occupying systems we needed. You issued an ultimatum and invaded," Boltar said firmly. "That is aggression, not expansion. The council has been too lenient with Drexian expansion in the past. That ends now. The Drexian Empire will pay reparations to humanity for the attempted invasion. Additionally, all systems conquered by the Drexians in the past 20 years will be reviewed for potential restoration to their original inhabitants." "This is outrageous," Krithax roared. "You cannot—" "We can and we will," Boltar interrupted. "The council has voted. The decision is final." Krithax stared around the chamber. Species that had cowered before Drexian might were now standing firm. The defeat at New Sol had broken something. The Drexians were no longer feared. They were just another aggressive species that had been stopped. "We will not forget this," Krithax said darkly. "Neither will we," Velthar replied. "That is the point." The council session ended. Krithax left the chamber in silence. His empire's power diminished. Behind him, representatives from dozens of species approached Sunwoo, each wanting to discuss potential alliances with humanity. Later that evening, Sunwoo met with Velthar, Tikvan, and Admiral Borum in private quarters. They sat together drinking tea that Borum had brought from Earth. "The galaxy has changed today," Borum said. "More species approached me in the last hour than in my entire career. Everyone wants to be humanity's friend now." "Not all of them are sincere," Sunwoo cautioned. "Some just want to align with us because we seem useful now." "True," Velthar agreed. "But that is how it starts. Practical alliances can become real friendships over time. If humanity treats them with the same compassion you showed us, those alliances will strengthen." Tikvan leaned forward. "The question is, what happens next? The Drexian Empire is wounded but not destroyed. They will remember this defeat, and other aggressive species are watching. They will be more cautious now, but they will still test humanity's resolve." "Let them test," Borum said. "We are not alone anymore, and the galaxy has learned an important lesson. Humanity remembers favors. We pay back loyalty. That makes us unpredictable in ways that scare people who think only in terms of power and profit." Sunwoo smiled. "My grandfather would be proud. He made a choice 50 years ago that everyone called foolish. Today that choice has changed the balance of galactic power." Velthar nodded slowly. "Your grandfather understood something important. Compassion is not weakness. It is strength that takes time to reveal itself. He planted a seed 50 years ago. Today we harvested the fruit." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Velthar spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "You know, the Drexians were not entirely wrong. Humanity is emotional. You make decisions based on feelings more than calculations. But they misunderstood what that means. Emotions create bonds that mathematics cannot predict. Those bonds can shake the foundations of empires." The next day, Sunwoo returned to Earth. As his shuttle descended toward the capital city,